Information Station 1370 WOCA. Ocala.
All right, 25 minutes before 11 o'clock. The things that we go through in this lifetime make us who we are. The things we go through in this lifetime change who we were to who we become because of those things. And probably that statement is no more true for our military folks than any other group of people. Maybe if you're in the firefighter, if you're a police officer, law enforcement officer, I think those types of jobs and those type of long-term exposure to circumstances that the rest of us don't have to go through certainly must change those folks who have to do those things, which is why we salute and recognize our veterans. Diane Cameron has written a book that certainly makes you question whether or not war changes a person. Diane, first of all, is an award-winning columnist. Her work appears in many publications: the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Chicago Tribune, the Christian Science Monitor, the Baltimore Sun, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the San Francisco Chronicle, the Altamont Enterprise. You get the picture. She's all over the place. And her book is called Never Leave Your Dead. This is a true story, and here's how it's described. A true story of war trauma, murder, and madness. Her book reveals the true story of her stepfather, Donald Watkins, a former Marine who served in China during the Japanese invasion of 1937 through 39. He murdered his first wife and mother-in-law in 1953. That's what I know. Let's find out the rest. Diane Cameron. Good morning, Diane.
Good morning, Larry. It's so nice to be with you.
Where are you calling from?
I am calling from my home in Albany, New York.
So did you have to do research for this, or is this one of those stories that you always knew?
No, I had to, obviously I knew Donald. He was married to my mother, and I got to know him. He was an elderly man when I met him. So I thought I knew his story, and it wasn't until after he died, and I, wanted to find out more about that first murder, because that was an issue for our family.
Really?
Well. And it was an issue. When my mother told us, actually, Donald was so honorable. He told her his whole story before they were married.
Oh, my gosh.
But my mother, being my mother, didn't tell us until after they were married. Because she knew her kids were going to have a little bit of a reaction.
So she must have somehow reconciled within herself that there were certain circumstances that made that happen, and not to justify it, but to at least so she would feel that she wasn't going to be at risk, right?
Absolutely. And it's one of the things I talk about in the book is my own mixed reaction. At one point I thought, is she crazy to marry this guy? On the other hand, I was in my 30s when they got married, and I thought, when she says the past is the past, she really meant it. She was seeing this man in front of her who was a good man and a decorated veteran, and she understood. We didn't have the words trauma. We didn't talk about post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
But I think she really knew. She knew in her heart this guy would not have murdered his first wife, that was the trauma of his life.
Wow. But, yeah, and at the same time, I'm guessing the first wife and the mother-in-law, is that who he killed? He killed two people,
yes.
right? I'm guessing they were just innocent. I mean, right? They didn't deserve what came to them, right?
No, not at all. And the irony of this story, and one of the things, it took me years to write this, but one of the things that kept me going, maybe about 5 years ago, I had put the book down, I put it away, I wasn't sure, and the front of the New York Times had a story about a veteran who came home, and he was the perfect neighbor and the perfect employee, and he was a scout leader, and he was active in his church, and one day he came home and he killed his wife, and I just sat up straight, and I thought, that's Donald. But the difference today is we say, oh, he was a vet. Oh, probably had some trauma. Though that whole thing was missing in the 50s. And those guys suffered.
Yeah. And so, gosh, so how do you look at him now, looking back at it all? Do you feel sorry for him? I'm sure the people who... I'm sure there were people who never forgave him.
I'm sure, too. I'm sure the relatives of that first wife and her mother-in-law, are probably like, that crazy murdering guy. My hope would be that the next generations of that family might think, oh, veteran trauma, maybe there was more to the story. I mean, but it's mixed when veterans commit a crime, and that certainly was a crime, it was a murder. We do need...
Diane, you're an accomplished columnist, and I want to use the word columnist. I know you're an author as well, but I want to use the word columnist because a columnist usually has almost a poetic skill to, in a very few words, convey a story and make a point. That's a columnist in a few words, fewer words than a.
Thank you for appreciating that.
Yeah, well, anybody who reads the newspaper knows this, right? So, are you in the book trying to make a point?
Yes, I am, and actually, making several points. One is that trauma is a very long story, and to that question of that original family, the whole trauma story doesn't get revealed for years and years. So the men that I was interviewing, they were in their 90s, the guys who had been China Marines at the time of Donald, and they were still, this is fascinating, they were still, some of them going to counseling, still trying to sort it out. The other point that I try to make in this story is that there's a lot of gray. We want people to be guilty or innocent. We want them to be right or wrong. And Donald's story, especially, is very gray. He was an old guy. He was an old vet, with all of that sort of romantic and stereotypical picture. But he was also a guy with this, if you just look at the past, a terrible past. But he was also the love of my mother's life. That's the other thing. They were so in love.
Did he spend any time in prison?
He spent 28 years in a hospital prison, in eastern Pennsylvania.
And so this hospital prison, was it designed to help people with mental illness?
Well, I put hospital in quotes usually when I write about it because it turned out that he was in Fairview State Hospital in Pennsylvania. It turned out later, there's a story too, it was the most notorious and violent psychiatric hospital in the United States.
Really? So
even the governor of Pennsylvania couldn't enter the hospital.
So wouldn't that, 28 years in that environment, wouldn't that actually increase the trauma?
Absolutely. And this is what makes me really examine this whole story, because there was the China trauma, the China and Japanese trauma. Donald comes home, obviously no treatment, it's cooking, he's alone, he doesn't go to any other vets to talk. He commits the murders. The next day he is swept away to the other side of the state, which turns out to be a greater trauma because there's rape, there's beating, there's starvation. And this was documented in a Pulitzer Prize-winning series by the Philadelphia Inquirer. And they said they couldn't believe people survived Fairview. And what I think, this is another one of the points, Donald was a Marine. Through this whole thing, all the craziness, all the hospitalization, 80 years later, he still had Marine skills. So he was a survivor. Wow. He figured out a way to survive far, and that's the inspirational part of this book.
Was was that hospital shut down eventually?
It was shut down, and then eventually, a lot of those hospitals were shut down, and states turned them into other things. This one was so notorious, the state actually brought it to the ground. There had been a lot of murders within the hospital.
Oh, my.
Diane Cameron is our guest. Her book is called Never Leave Your Dead, a true story of war, trauma, murder, and madness. And the focal point of the story is Donald Watkins, and Donald was your stepfather. How did your mother meet him?
When Donald was released from the hospital, and he was very bright, he negotiated that release, and he came back to Western Pennsylvania, lived in a rural area near to where he had lived with his first wife, and where he grew up, and he would come into downtown Pittsburgh, maybe about an hour away, once a month, kind of to do business. My mother was a very flirtatious woman, very extroverted, and he walked into a restaurant where she was buying lunch, and she flirted with him, I'm pretty sure. And he said, if you come back here next week, I will buy you lunch. And that was the beginning.
Wow. Isn't that something?
Yeah. And she had been widowed for about 12 years. And so they were right for each other. As crazy as it sounds, they were right for each other.
What a story. Diane, we need to take a little break, and we'll be right back. We can't wait to hear some more of this story, though. Never Leave Your Dead is the title of the book. Diane Cameron. We'll be right back with Diane after this.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident. On this Tuesday, partly sunny. Watch out for a thunderstorm this afternoon. The high 92 to 96. And partly cloudy, warm and muggy Tuesday night, though 74 to 78. For Wednesday and Thursday, partly sunny with a chance of a thunderstorm each day, mainly during the afternoon hours over the interior. The high both days between 93 and 97. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
The very best in quality is Captain T's Upholstery.
Hey, this is Dan. Let me ask you a few questions. Does your boat look better with the cover on? Has your car's interior seen its better days? Stop using a towel to cover up those rips in the golf cart. Isn't it about time you had it restored to better than new with a custom upholstery from Captain T? Captain T's Upholstery has been right here in Ocala for nearly 20 years, so they know how to make your ride one of a kind. Whether you want to take that classic ride back to a factory look or put your favorite sports team front and center, Captain T's Upholstery is who to call. 352-369-1810. That's 352-369-1810. Or stop by their location, 5030 South Pine Avenue in Ocala, just past the drive-in. And of course, don't forget to visit them on the web, CaptainTUpholstery.com.
The very best in quality is Captain T's Upholstery.
FlySanford.com, Orlando Sanford International Airport. We are SFB. Simpler, faster, better. Simpler, with an easy-to-navigate, compact airport design. You won't need your running shoes. Faster, with quick processing times from parking to plane in minutes. Better, with more nonstop flights to your favorite places. And new destinations are being added all the time. For enjoyable travel, come to Orlando Sanford International Airport. We are SFB. Simpler, faster, better. Before you fly, FlySanford.com.
Hospice of Marion County has an urgent need for volunteers to share a conversation with someone, run errands, hold someone's hand. All you need is a willingness to help others. Our volunteers believe the blessings they receive far exceed the services they offer. Will you consider serving, caring, and making a difference? Call today, 873-7441. Hospice of Marion County, making more moments of life possible.
All right, 12 minutes before 11 o'clock. This story is captivating me for sure. Never Leave Your Dead is the title of the book, written by Diane Cameron. Diane is on the phone right now. Thank you for waiting through the break, Diane. Did I ask you where you are? Where are you?
I'm in Albany, New York.
Oh, in Albany. Okay. Do you know, I think the one thing that I take away from what I've learned so far is that we really have to, and I think we are recognizing the reality of PTSD, but I think your book underscores the consequences if we don't recognize it.
That's true, and it takes many different forms. I mean, unfortunately, we've just had 4th of July. You know, we have this stereotype of the guy who's hitting the deck and who is sort of shaking and frightened. Mm-hmm. That's one picture. There are also people where the impact maybe is about interfering with their relationships. Their fear for their kids maybe impairs their ability to parent. So there's a gamut.
You know, we have a veterans program that we do here every Thursday, and years ago there was a couple that came in, and he was a Korean War veteran, and I won't take up too much time because this is your interview, but I want to tell you this real quick because it applies. She, the wife, was talking about how therapy helped her husband, and they didn't even know something was wrong. They had gone to a thing, and they were asking, and they were learned about PTSD, and they discussed it among themselves. And he said, "You know, that sounds like me." And she said, "Well, why don't you go to the therapy? It wouldn't hurt." Well, it turns out he had PTSD that he was still holding on to from the Korean War.
Yeah.
Went to the therapy, and she said he's a changed man because of the therapy. For anybody who wants to criticize psychological work, I mean, you have to speak to somebody like that.
Mm-hmm. Right, and I talked to a lot of one of the pleasures of the book was I wanted to really understand today's trauma and what it meant when we didn't have all the psychological language that we had, in the 40s and the 50s and before that for these guys. And, many of the experts said to me, people at the VA, we're still seeing those older vets, and healing is possible. That's part of trauma being a long story, is that, healing is still possible. and for the family as well.
Your book would prove a good read for all of the men and women going into the military, because they don't really realize that when they come out, they might have a problem and either not realize it or not admit it because they don't want to seem like they're a failure.
Exactly, and I think we have a cultural job to do in helping to sort of reframe these injuries, and I think we're beginning to understand it's an injury. It's not a weakness.
I'm looking through the book. You have a photograph of a card. Let me read it to you. You probably know which one I'm going to talk about. The card says, I just had it here a second ago. I guess this is tell the driver, Moon Lan Lu, Venus Cafe. To explain that.
Okay, so for our United States China Marines, when they went to China, picture this: they're young guys, 18 or lying about their age. They're in their early 20s. Mm-hmm. China duty for United States Marines was considered good duty, and one of the reasons why was the American businesses in China, which they were going there to protect, and lots of European businesses. Shanghai was called the Paris of the Orient. So bars, dancing, beautiful girls. The exchange rate was fabulous for a young man. He could buy booze and jewelry and women and parties and, take taxi rides and go all over town. And then the rest of the trauma began as the Japanese pushed into those cities. But in the beginning, they were sort of partying all night, light duty during the day, and then it got really ugly and quite a shock to them.
Buying women is implying prostitution, and
exactly.
And I'm thinking that's part. When you come out of that scene, and you have to come back to America, and all of a sudden you realize you've done that. There's got to be some shame associated with that as well.
And I think that's one of the things. These guys, of course, they weren't going to tell their sweethearts who were waiting for them, or the girl they met when they got back. They're not going to cop to that at all. But inside of you, then you're embarrassed, you're ashamed, because the value system's different when you get back home.
Yeah.
Did you meet any of the families of Donald's first wife and mother-in-law, and did he have any children?
He did not have children. They weren't married a long time. In fact, they were they had just bought a house. They were decorating it. They were probably going to plan the family. And, we use the term somebody snapped. It's really what happened. He came home from school one day, and he killed his mother-in-law first. He had a lot of delusions about her. And then he sadly, he killed his wife as a protective gesture, if you can imagine that. He didn't want her to be alone.
So the newspaper article says...
psychotic thinking.
The newspaper article that I just looked at said jealousy. What was he jealous of?
Yeah. I think he had spun himself into a place that his mother-in-law didn't like him, and I think there was evidence of that, and that she was going to, separate him and his wife. And I understand also from other stories his wife was very pretty, he was insecure, that was all spinning in his head.
If he were alive, would he be embarrassed by this book?
I don't think so. I actually started the book when my brothers were alive, and I talked to them about that very question. And as I was writing the book, I would say to myself, could I show this to Donald? Could I show this to everybody in my family? Because I really tried to make the case. Yes, he had mental illness and he had trauma, but he was a good man. I got to see that good man and learn about that good man.
The hospital, 28 years in the hospital prison, did it solve any problems for him, or did it just create more?
I think two things. I think it created more, but in an odd way, it created, it strengthened his resolve. I think there was a point, probably several points, where he clearly knew what he had done. He was so tragically sad about it, but he knew that this sort of bad hospital wasn't the right place. So he stayed very organized. Wow. This was a hospital where they medicated people, and he stayed organized.
Your mother must have given him the only time in his life where he felt love.
Yes, absolutely true. And interesting, because I talked to some of the therapists at the VA who, they didn't know Donald, but they knew this kind of situation, and they looked at the story and they said, he found your mother and your mother found him at exactly the right time, because he wasn't going to be okay staying in his rural area by himself. And he got big love, and clearly big acceptance. I mean, this woman said the past is the past, and I don't think anybody was willing to say that.
No. Did he give her as much as she gave him, do you think?
Yes, he did. And I have to say, when they met, I was in my 30s, and they were dating and going places. And I talk about this in the book. They had a wonderful, intimate life as well, which was pretty surprising for me to learn about.
Yeah,
Wow.
because you're the child.
Yeah, how do you learn that?
You don't want to hear about that in your folks, you know.
But now, I'm older, and looking back, I think, isn't that what a lot of people want? You want love and intimacy and caring, and everybody has a past. His is more shocking than most.
Yeah.
Did your mom and Donald go to see a counselor before they got married just to make sure that he was okay and your mom was okay with this?
No, and that's the sort of that moment of not. I mean, today that's what probably you and I would do. We'd drag our new boyfriend or partner off to a therapist to get checked out. They were of the generation which was like, okay, my gut feels good about you, and we only have maybe 20 years left. Let's do this thing.
Yeah. Robin mentioned that the book would be good for somebody listening. I think it would be good for somebody who is the family member of somebody coming back.
I agree. I think the book would be right for a lot of people, anybody who's been touched by military experience or even other kinds of trauma, because I spend a lot of time in the book explaining just how trauma works, whether it's military or abuse. People have been in terrible car accidents.
Yeah, and when somebody has gone through the war, my dad was in the war, in World War II, and then he spent 20 years in the police department in New York, and I'm guessing it was just an extension.
Yeah.
I mean, and when he retired, he really did calm down a lot. He was a different person after he had been retired for a few years. Then kind of everything got calmer.
That's a lot of years to have adrenaline in your body, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, people just don't want to feel like failures, though. And you're really giving people a reason not to feel like a failure.
That's my hope. Both the family members and the veterans to know, soon I hope we're going to treat this like an amputated limb. We're going to treat this like, lung disease.
Maybe, yeah.
I would love to see that.
There's an obvious question that we haven't asked you yet. The title, "Never Leave Your Dead." What's the what does the title mean?
Well, one of the things, because I didn't grow up in a military family, so I had to learn about the Marines, and the Marines say a lot of things, like you can only eat what you kill, and one of the things that Marines say of themselves is Marines don't leave their dead. That's why all those scenes of going back in and dragging that last guy out. And so it occurred to me that in writing this book, I want to not leave Donald, not leave my mother, not leave the China Marines that I met, to let their stories live on, even though they have died.
Did he witness the massacre that's mentioned in the book, the Japanese?
Yeah, he was there for all of those things, and horrendous. Our U.S. Marines' daily duty was picking up the body parts.
Oh.
I mean, you think about how do you ask human beings to do that? But we do, but with cost, and I think that's the piece we forget. Yes, we have to ask people to do this, but now let's treat the cost of it. You
have really let us all in on something hugely personal, Diane, and probably nobody in your family better to do this and to extend what was a family thing and now becomes at least a national thing. We're all going to learn from this.
Mm-hmm. Good, thank you.
I have a copy of the book, and if you would like it, listeners, call me, and I can give one of you the book. If you're the first one that gets through, bingo, you've got it. The number is 622-9622. The rest of us have to go buy it. And Diane, do you have a website, first of all?
Yes, www.dianecameron.info.
DianeCameron.info. Okay, let's not forget the info part. I'm guessing the other booksellers all have it, Amazon, etc.?
Yes, they do. All bookstores and Amazon.
And let me give this one away. Good morning. You've got the book. Who's this?
This is Tim Gray, T-R-A-Y.
Okay, Tim, do you know where we are?
No, I don't.
No, okay, we're in the Paddock Mall, just outside of the food court. Don't go in the mall. Just come in up to the mall, and then before you get into the food court, you'll see us on the right side. You can't miss us.
What city?
Ocala.
Okay.
What city are you in?
I'm in Leesburg, traveling to Kissimmee right now, but I'll come back up to Ocala tomorrow.
Okay, well, we'll have it waiting for you, all right? Thank you.
Let me write this down. Paddock Mall.
Yeah, Paddock Mall on State Road 200, not too far from I-75. Let me lower your pot and say goodbye to Diane. Diane Cameron, thank you so much for being on the air today. That was some interview. That was awesome.
Larry, such a pleasure. I love talking to you.
All right, we've got to take a break. This is WOCA Ocala.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. President Obama for the first time will appear at a campaign event with Hillary Clinton. It will be in Charlotte, North Carolina after they fly there on Air Force One.
Donald Trump tweeted in response, "Why is President Obama allowed to use Air Force One on the campaign trail with crooked Hillary?" The White House quickly pointed out, "We follow all rules and regulations to ensure that the Democratic National Committee pays what is required for the president to travel to political events."
Fox's Rich Edson. Trump will stage his own rally in Raleigh, North Carolina. They're cleaning up Kentucky after 4th of July storms caused a lot of damage.
My poor old neighbor's car there, he got right through the windshield with a limb and come from my tree.
That man in Rockcastle County. You'll soon be able to buy stock in the maker of Twinkies and Ding Dongs. 4 years after seeking bankruptcy protection, Hostess Brands is about to return as a publicly traded company. Fox News, we report, you decide.
Cold weather slows your battery down. But if it's hot enough to cook breakfast on your hood, your battery could be toast. So pick up a Napa Legend battery today, and you'll get a $15 rebate Visa card by mail. That's $15 back and a new battery. In case your old one gets fried, that's Napa Know-How. At participating Napa Auto Parts stores. Some exclusions apply. Offer expires 7/31/16.
I'm Rob Gronkowski. When the little voice in my stomach gets hungry, he doesn't just whisper. He yells, "We need all-natural Alberto beef jerky." So next time the little voice in your stomach asks for a snack, grab the most delicious lean protein on the planet, Alberto beef jerky. Each package is loaded with savory cuts of lean beef. Listen to me and pick up some